just want to present, to the audience the real me, who I am, and how I became the person that I am today. You'll see me referring to my notes as I speak, just so that I won't leave much out. I do have a long story, and I'm going to strive to break it down as much as I can for y'all. As I said, I'm grateful for everyone that's listening. It's like a lot of times we always hear stories from, the celebrities, people with all this fame and fortune, and we disregard the so-called regular people out here that go through things every day. They go through struggles every day. They go through trials and tribulations every day, but yet make extraordinary accomplishments in life. And the stories never get heard. For whatever reason, they just out here actually living the life. Providing the examples in real time. And I myself one of them people. So, as I said, I just want to go ahead and start from the beginning and give y'all my story. I also would like to say that with me giving my story, I'm not looking for any sympathy. I'm not looking for anyone to feel sorry for me or anything of that nature. I just want to share my story because I think that it's very purposeful and it will inspire and encourage others, in their lives and what they're doing, what they're going through in their lives. Also, some of the people that I may talk about are no longer here. So in respects to that, I would say rest in peace. No disrespect to anyone. I'm just telling my truth. And I also ask that you respect that. So, without further ado, I'm going to begin. So, I was born on October 1st, 1975, to Vernell Conyers, who was born in Sumter, South Carolina. She had 5 brothers and 3 sisters. I was born in Long Island, Strong Island. Give a shout out. East Meadow, New York, where they now call it Nassau University Medical Center, originally known as Meadowbrook Hospital. I was the last of my mom's 5 children, which included my 2 older sisters and 2 older brothers. And we all have different fathers. And I'll get into mine, as, my story, as I continue to tell my story. So, after I was born, my mom's passed away from an aneurysm 5 months after I was born. During this time, we were taken in by her 3 sisters. So, my brothers, sisters, and I, were divided up into the 3 sisters. That kept us out of the foster care system, and, which was a good thing, kept us within the family. I went to live with my Aunt Eva, who also had a son who was 5 years older than me. That would eventually, she would become my mom. That was a person that I knew as my mom. My first memories was us living in Westbury, Long Island, New York, in like a low-income apartment building. I remember running around in my diaper at times, riding my big wheel, just seeing the older folks out there, congregating, just doing what they do. And, that was just the environment at the time. I'm not exactly sure how long we lived there. However, I know my aunt eventually met a man who was well skilled in carpentry and had a stable income, had a good income at that time. And she would end up marrying him. He was of Caribbean descent, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, a mix of Trinidadian and Jamaican. And he would eventually move us out of that low income apartment into a 3-bedroom home in Uniondale, Long Island, New York. I mean, this was a beautiful home, big backyard, beautiful neighborhood. I as a 3-4-year-old moving here from that low income apartment, I felt like, wow, I'm gonna have the best childhood ever. Like one of them, thought we were gonna be like one of them picture perfect families that you see on TV. Things didn't exactly turn out that way. And it became somewhat a lot of the opposite of what I initially thought that it would be. I started going to Walnut Elementary School, where I started kindergarten. And, this started the first signs of my reality and, what it really was for me. It became difficult for me to adjust. And, I'm living here in moderate, middle-class neighborhood. People pretty much established, functional households, mother and father in the household. The majority of children, they're well taken care of. You barely see any signs of poverty, So I didn't have that luxury. As I said, yeah, I lived in a nice house, great neighborhood. Like I said, we had a beautiful yard, beautiful home, fully furnished, never missed a meal. However, my appearance didn't reflect that. I went to school looking like an impoverished child from the ghetto. And that's no disrespect to anyone. In addition to that, my household wasn't the most favorable also. There were a lot of arguments between my aunt and uncle, which, caused the household to be chaotic as time went on. Because, my aunt, she was a Seventh-day Adventist, and we brought in the Sabbath every Friday evening into Saturday evening. If you're familiar with the Seventh-day Adventist, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Going to church every Saturday. No going out, no watching TV, no extracurricular activities unless it's involved with the church. From that Friday evening to that Saturday evening. However, outside of church, my life was very problematic. Going to school, I was picked on. I was bullied by my peers because, of my appearance, how I looked, the way I dressed, hand-me-downs, dirty sneakers, sometimes holes in my sneakers. My hygiene wasn't up to par. You know, I'm a young child. I peed in the bed. So, you know, that attributed to, you know, how I looked, you know, how I smelled, things of that nature. You know, I always felt like an outcast, like the black sheep. Got into a lot of fights because of this. You know, got suspended from school a lot. You know, either, you know, I was being a class clown or just, you know, seeking attention, which that got me in trouble with the teacher. And, you know, arguing and fighting with my classmates didn't help either. So, you know, as I said, I went to school looking like a underprivileged kid from the ghetto. You know, so kids would, you know, joke a lot, you know, about me. This went on for a while, you know, pretty much from like the 1st to the 5th grade. You know, I remember coming up and a lot of jokes were made about, you know, your mom. You know, a lot of mama jokes were like one of the biggest things, and that never sat well with me. I got into a lot of fights over that. And, you know, going back, you know, when I said that, you know, when I was living in Westbury, New York, Long Island, and, you know, because my aunt had took me in, but, you know, and although she became my mom, I always knew, it was something to me that I knew that she wasn't my biological mom. Now, my father did come around a lot. He came around a lot to see me, you know, when we were living in Westbury. And, you know, being that I wasn't familiar with him like that, you know, I would be scared to, you know, go with him. You know, he wanted me to, you know, come to his home for the weekend, things like that. But I would be scared to because, you know, I wasn't too familiar with him. You know, and I don't know why he didn't gain custody of me either when my mom passed away. And I'm not even sure if, you know, if I learned from him that my aunt wasn't my biological mom. However, somehow I knew. You know, yet I still call my aunt my mom, and I still looked at her as my mom. Now, you know, going back, fast forwarding back to school, you know, as I said, I was bullied a lot, joked about a lot. You know, the mom jokes didn't sit well with me. That caused me to get into a lot of fights, a lot of suspensions. You know, I think I had a fight just about every time those jokes were made. You know, and you know, I remember going to school and, you know, the kids, you know, pizza sales going on, pretzel sales going on, and I never was given any money for any of that. And after a while, I started stealing from the kids, you know, taking their pizza money, their pretzel money. And, you know, my teachers knew. They kind of knew that it was me stealing because they never saw me come with any money. Excuse me. You know, and my cousin, you know, who I also called my brother, we went to the same school. I was in the 1st grade, he was in the 6th grade. They used to call up to his classroom just to ask him if, you know, my mom had gave us money that day to, you know, purchase pizza or pretzel, you know, whatever sale was going on. he would have to come from his classroom and lie to my teacher, saying, "Yeah, I gave, our moms gave, us money, or no, or I gave him money, just to save my ass, pretty much." That went on a couple of times, and like I said, the teachers knew, the students knew. Somehow, they just let me get away with it. But that was also something that, took place during this time. And as I said, this went on, to about the 1st and the 5th grade. And, it didn't help that every time I got in trouble at school, the teacher would call my, the home, speak with my aunt, I was beat with extension cords, fan belts, punches, fists, kicks, whatever. Whatever she felt, however she felt at that time, that's what I was getting. That's how she was coming at me. And, my uncle, when he came home, if he felt, like he wanted to discipline me, then that was another ass whooping I was getting. And that's just what it was. This eventually led to me running away from home, and I would run away some friend's house at times, or I would run away to my aunt's house where my 2 older sisters lived. And in the midst of that, my own issues in school, as I said, I witnessed a lot of fights and arguments between my mom and dad, my aunt and uncle. I mean, I can go into some stories, we're living in a suburban neighborhood, and I'm watching my aunt being chased down the street by my Jamaican Trinidadian uncle with machetes and stuff. That's just part of it. He had a very bad temper as well as she did, and when they got into it, it got crazy. And not for nothing, he started off going to church. I believe he was also a deacon in the church, but that all changed. He started drinking his Christian brothers, smoking his weed, and also, that also led to his infidelity. And as I said, I'm not trying to speak bad about anybody, disrespect anyone. However, I'm just telling my truth. As I said, I will be referring to my notes from time to time just to, make sure that I'm not leaving a lot out. So, appreciate y'all bearing with me with this. Now, continuing to get in trouble in school and getting suspended, coming home, getting beat, running away, to where my sisters live. My oldest 2 brothers were with my other aunts at the time. However, I would always eventually return home. I remember one time getting suspended from school, and I can't remember what grade I was in or not, but I know that my aunt, she brought me home, and she was like, what's going on with you? Like, why are you continuing to, misbehave in school, be rebellious? Why you continue to get in trouble? Like, what's going on? Is it because I remember what happened was she had came to the school, and a friend of mine was like, "Who's that? Ron?" No, that's my name, Ron. Ronnie. So my mom named me Ronnie. And he was like, "Who's that, Ron?" And I was like, "Oh, this is my mom." And he's like, "Oh, I thought you said your mom's was dead." Because, I that's why I used to get in the fights. I used to tell people, "Look, don't talk about my mom. My mom is not here. My mom's dead. I don't like people talking about my moms." So, my classmates and everybody pretty much knew that. And, that time when she came up to the school, and I said, "That's my mom," and he said that, she was looking like, she looked shocked. And she brought me home that day, and as I said, she asked me, why I continued to get in trouble in school, being rebellious and all of that. And, she also asked me if it was because, my mom, and I told her, I was like, yeah, I would like to know more about my mom because, nobody really told me things about my mom or anything of that. They never really talked about my mom. I don't know if they were still processing it or if it was, hurtful for them. I can't, explain that. I do know, however, that, for whatever reason, she decided to show me a picture of my mom. Back then, they had the Polaroid pictures, and there was a picture of my mom in the casket. This is the first time that I'm ever seeing my mom. And there was a picture in the casket, picture of her in her casket, and I broke down immediately. To this day, I don't know why that would be the first picture that she would show me of my mom. When she seen me break down, I still don't know what was going on through her mind. She decided that it would be best for her to burn the picture on the stove in front of me. Which, like I said, I don't know what was going on through her mind, what she felt, what she thought, but I know that didn't sit well with me at all. That didn't sit well with me at all. That just added fuel to the fire. I remember going back to school, maybe a couple days, a week or so after that, get suspended again. And this was like a continuous cycle. Every other week, month, I was getting suspended from school for something or the other. And like I said, this went on from the 1st to the 5th grade. And, when I would come home and get beat like that, I would run away. Until this one day, I ran away from good. I ran away from home for good. And this all occurred, because, as I said, my uncle was a very skilled carpenter, and he eventually, built some more rooms into the household. So he made it from a 3-bedroom into a 5-bedroom. And, he would rent out those rooms. When we first moved to the home, me and my brother, my cousin, we lived up, we stayed upstairs, where there were 2 bedrooms upstairs, and we stayed upstairs. He wanted his own room, but I was scared to be in a room by myself, so we shared one room, and then there was a room open. And as I said, my uncle, he built 2 more rooms in the basement. Me and my brother, my cousin, we would eventually move, he move us down stairs in the basement in the room, and a lot of that was because I used to pee in the bed. They used to get mad. I used to get whooping for peeing in the bed all the time, and my uncle got mad, because of the smell and everything. He was like one of the first. He was like, that's, being that we was upstairs, and it was like one of the first smells you smell when you walk through the door. So he just, we moved us down to the basement, and like I said, he was renting rooms out, and one particular room he rented out to was one of my older cousins. He left from home, and he wanted to be on his own, so he rented a room for my aunt and uncle. He lived with us for a while, and one day, seeing the routine of my uncle, had, like I said, a stable income, had a great job, in Unionville, in Nassau Coliseum. And he made good bank. As I said though, he drunk his Christian brothers, he smoked his weed, and so for whatever reason, I guess my two cousins, one being my older cousin and one being my brother cousin, they came up with this plan to take his money, on Friday when he came home, and they included me in that plan. So I would be the one that would have to go and take the money. So they knew his routine pretty much. They knew he was going to come home Friday night with his Christian brothers, drink, smoke his weed, then, he eventually go and take a shower. Once he was in the shower, I was to go in the room, because, they knew he placed his wallet on the nightstand. Of course, the man is home, he's comfortable. No reason to hide his wallet or anything like that. So they knew, wallet would be on the nightstand, check cash, wallet full of money. That's how my uncle did, Came home with his money, I believe, and we gave it to my aunt for her to, figure out the finances or, put it in the bank or whatever she was going to do. My aunt wasn't home this night. I don't know if she was attending church services or whatever, but my aunt wasn't home this night. So, the plan was for me to go get the money out the wallet once he went to shower. And, all that happened. I did. Went, got the money from the wallet. Went and gave it to my cousins. However, my uncle was not as drunk and high as they thought he would be. Now, soon after he got out that shower, all I heard was, "Boy, come here!" And I don't have the accent to say how he said it, about, Caribbeans, they had that, when they start speaking that patois, that's how he was coming. And all I heard was, "Bring your ass upstairs now, boy. Your teeth from me. We're gonna kill you, boy. Where's my money? Where's my money?" And at this point, I'm in shock, scared to death. I'm scared to death. And, I'm scared of my uncle, and I'm scared of telling on my cousins at the same time. So I'm sitting there acting like I don't know what's going on. I didn't take any money. And, he just looking at me like, "Boy, you bet your teeth from me, I'll kill you, boy." Them, Caribbeans, they have standards and moral principles. They don't play with certain things. And plus, my uncle already had a bad temper. So I was just left to take the consequences. As I'm trying to, as I'm sitting there in shock, not saying nothing, Uncle just slapped the shit out of me. Like, just slapped all the taste out of my mouth, as they say. You know, demanding that I give him his money back. And, you know, he kept saying, your teeth from me? I'll kill you, fucking boy. Your teeth, I'll kill you. You know, that's all I can remember hearing. He's like, give me my money back now. And me, I'm still acting like I don't know what's going on, scared to death, trying not to tell. All the while I'm being beaten like a rag doll. I mean, he punching me, slapping shit out of me, everything. Till eventually he started, you know, he beat me down like I was a grown man. You know, to the point he started stomping on my head with his feet on the concrete floors. You know, you know, we had concrete floors that he designed and made in the home. And he just kept stomping my head and just punching me, beating, telling me to give him his money, give him his money. You know, my cousin's downstairs hearing this. So, you know, they eventually run up the stairs with the money. You know, trying to calm my cousin down to the point where they had to actually, you know, grab me from under, you know, my uncle's feet from the way he was stomping me, you know, give him the money. But what they did was, when they came with the money, they're telling him, oh, Uncle, we found the money. We found the money, relax, calm down, trying to calm him down from beating on me. We found the money. And they say, oh, it was under his bed. He hid it under his bed. Still putting all the blame on me. Not saying that this was their plan, not taking no accountability for what they, you know, what they made me do. And I think I was about 8, 9 years old at the time. Yeah, so, you know, I'm sitting there, you know, once, you know, I escaped that raft, they pulled me from under, you know, his raft, pretty much. And I'm beat, I'm bruised badly. And I don't even know what to say to them. I'm just full of rage in a way, and like, just thinking about revenge, because I'm like, I can't believe y'all made me do this and go through that just now. You know, in the back of my mind, you know, still striving to process everything that just took place. And I'm not sure if I ran away that night or the day after, but I know that was the final straw for me. I was getting up out of there. I got up out of there, and you know, I vowed never to come back. There was no returning, you know, after that. And you know, so much other stuff went on, you know, leading up to that. I definitely had my mind made up. I was not coming back to this home. And this would change my life dramatically. That being said, I'm going to end it on that note. I thank you all for listening. Thank you all for allowing me to share the first part of my story. It will be continued. As I said, you know, also peace and blessings to all. And as always, motivation through madness. Peace. Hey, peace and blessings, my people. Y'all know who it is, True Born. Y'all know the movement, y'all know the vibes, motivation through madness all day, every day. As y'all see, out here get my little run and walk on. Peace and blessings, people. Y'all know who it is, True Born. Y'all know the movement, y'all know the vibes, motivation through madness, every day, all day. Just see, out here and just enjoying the vibes, enjoying nature. Hey, what it do, my peoples? How y'all feeling today? Hope all is well. Sending positive vibes and energy to all. You already know what it is, motivation through madness all day, every day. But listen, let me talk to y'all for a second. You know, although I get on here and make these videos every day, you know, I go through it too. I have my bad days, I have my moments. I have my times when I just want to say, fuck it, you know what? I'm done. I'm tired. I don't want to do this no more. Even days when I said to myself, I don't want to be here no more. If I can't live the way that I want to live, do the things that I want to do, what's the purpose of me being here? I just don't want to exist, I want to live. You know, my motto, live and love it alive. You know, the difference is though, when I have those feelings and when I have those emotions, I look myself in the mirror. I go look myself in the mirror and I say, I can't disappoint myself. I can't give up on me. I can't let me down. And that's what keeps me going. That's what gets my focus back. Puts me back in alignment. Brush my shoulders off and man up. Because I know I can't give up. I know that I ain't come this far just to come this far. You understand what I'm saying? Every day it's gonna be different. However, it's all about how you decide to take on whatever challenges come your way. It's all about the choices you make, how you put things in perspective. It's a mindset. And that's why I continue to do these videos. Because motivation through madness is just not words. Like I said, it's a mentality and it's a lifestyle. At least it's mine. And I like to share it with y'all. I like to encourage y'all also. Because as I always say, it's therapeutic for me. And I hope that it's therapeutic for some of you too. And I am extremely grateful for all those who listen, who like, you know, and continue to like, subscribe, and share. Because if you're not on that motivation through madness wave, then what are you doing? Get on that motivation through madness wave. Like, subscribe, and share. Like. If you don't like, share it with somebody who will. If you don't want to share it, hey man, pass the word along. Somebody who might want to share it and subscribe. You know? Be mindful. Don't take anything for granted. Especially don't take these words for granted. Don't take this motivation through madness movement for granted. Because this is a movement, this is the vibe, y'all. So regardless of what you going through today, how you feeling today, get up, get out and go get it. Make something happen, do something positive. Show some love to get some love. Live it and love it alive regardless. All right? Motivation through madness. Peace and blessings. Love, peace and happiness.
My relationship with God was crazy. And it made me not believe in God. It made me have arguments, talking to myself. I'm talking to God. I ain't talking to myself. I'm actually having a conversation with God. Why the fuck are you doing this to me? Like, you know what I'm saying? As a little kid. So when I learned all this information, and I'm reading all this information, it creates sort of a new relationship with God now. Now, you know, I'm starting to get a little wiser and see things a little differently. I'm learning about, you know, plant life and molecules and just how spectacular life is. Incredible. Right.